Let's talk about gender now. And so far, President Mahama has nominated about 7 women out of his 25 ministers. And this loosely translates to some 28%, or making him look on track to achieving his promise of 30% female representation in his cabinets. Let's have a conversation also on the back of that. And we've been joined in the studios by Sheila Menka Premo. She is a convener for the Affirmative Action Law Coalition. Thank you very much, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So just a few weeks ago, you were talking about the fact that government appointment has to be fair in terms of female representation, in all sectors. We've seen 7 out of the 25 so far. What's your assessment of that? Is that fair enough?
Thank you very much. So speaking on behalf of the Affirmative Action Law Coalition, our interest is in ensuring that this law, which was passed in 2024, that's Affirmative Action Gender Equity Act of 2024, Act 1121, is implemented. And the law requires that from the time it is passed, that's from 2024 to 2026, at least 30% of appointees, as far as the executive is concerned, should be women. This is because in many over the years, the number of women in terms of ministers' position, in terms of CEOs of big corporate companies,
organizations,
with government's interest in, have been men. So we are very happy that so far, out of the 25 appointed so far, 7 are women, making it 28%. That means that we are inching close to
the 30%
the 30% mark in the indicators. And we are hoping that as more appointments are made, this ratio will not go down.
Okay.
It would even be either retained or get better.
Okay.
Yes, I know they have up to 2026 to be able to achieve the target, but the earlier you start, the better. And I think that's a very good sign. And we are praying to have more women.
Okay.
We are also happy about the profile of the women who have been appointed. These are well-qualified, educated women who have experience, who are being appointed to various positions. So we have a lot of expectations of them, that they will perform and perform well, so that will open the doorway for other women to also be given opportunity to aspire to these higher positions.
Okay, let's talk about Dr. Agnes Namumulati, who is the Minister Designate for the Gender, Children and Social Protection Ministry. What do you think her contributions will be, to solving the issues that has confronted that ministry? Because we all know that that ministry especially has been bedeviled with a lot of challenges.
Yes, it's a very challenging ministry. The ministry responsible for gender, for children, which is these are issues by themselves, and then social protection. So these are huge issues which have been lumped together. So it's a very challenging ministry. I believe that with her background, she will be able to contribute a lot towards progress in that ministry. I know from the little I know of her background, she has some kind of development background with an emphasis on gender and development. So I think that she has the necessary qualifications that would enable her to perform and perform well.
Okay.
I've interacted with her as a member of parliament. The work that we do sometimes takes us to parliament, to meet the Gender and Children Committee and other committees. So we've met with her on a few occasions, particularly during the processing of the then affirmative action bill. And she seems to know what she's about, I would say, and seems very interested in gender issues.
I mean, now that you're talking about her qualification, I'd just like to be fair to my viewers and audience, I beg your pardon, and just read to them about her profile. So Mrs. Agnes Namumulati is a seasoned legislator and development expert with over 20 years of experience managing projects in governance, health, education, and women's rights. As a member of parliament for the Krowa constituency, she serves on key parliamentary committees, shaping a national policy and advancing gender and community-focused initiatives. Now, with a PhD in African Studies, Dr. Lati has held leadership roles such as General Secretary of the National Association of Local Authorities of Ghana, NALA.
Development goals, which says that by the year 2030, all member states should have achieved parity as far as gender is concerned. And so it's an international problem, and it's also our own local issue as well. Again, we in terms of why we are where we are, we are Ghanaians, so we have a lot of traditional norms and cultural traditional sayings, etc., which shows that women are not necessarily leaders. For instance, the tree, Akan people will say, a back is a tree, demo, meaning it is men who are supposed to have leadership, etc., etc. Some of the religions also push for male leadership as compared to women leadership. And therefore, it's been found that it's like if you exclude women from leadership, it's a whole resource of the country is being pushed aside. And it is also important that women sit at the table where decisions are made so that they can influence it. Because there are certain things that men think about, but they will not think about some things that women won't necessarily think about. When it comes to even lawmaking, I'm sure in this country, we've been here when we heard of a law which was passed. It was a tax law. It ended up increasing the price of sanitary pads and for women. And women too, our challenges are such that we are different levels. You know, for those in the urban areas, it wasn't a big problem. But the women, young girls in the rural areas became a big issue for them. It's an intersectional issue. So inclusivity is very important. And there's research out there which shows that in countries where there's inclusivity when it comes to leadership positions, their development is much better and is more sustainable. So for me, pushing for female leadership is very, very important. And therefore, I'm very happy that we have this law in place, and it is consciously getting all the sectors in this country ready to ensure that we have adequate female leadership, to ensure that we have better development in our country.
If you were to, be in a position to give advice to the minister designates for the gender ministry, for instance, what would you tell her to highlight on? What would be the key policies that you'd ask her to be on the lookout for, because which you believe have affected that ministry for a very long time? What are some of these issues that you'd ask her to focus on?
Okay, so there are quite a number of issues. For me, the one that is closest to me is this affirmative action gender equity law, which has been in the pipeline for a long time. Unfortunately, was passed last year. The passage of the law is not enough. There's a need for what we call implementing legislation. Every act of parliament, there's room for regulations or legislative instruments to, implement certain parts of it. So I'm hoping that she'll make it a priority to ensure that this LI gets done. Again, the law also requires the setting up of a body known as the Gender Equity Committee that will do the implementation. That body is yet to be constituted. So I'm hoping that she would also put this body in place as early as possible, and also look for resources for them to do their work.
Okay.
One of the key things they're supposed to do is to have a plan of action on how to implement this law, and to have a baseline study to see where every sector is, so that when it comes to measuring progress, they know how to do that. So getting this law implemented is one of the key areas. Again, one of the policies in this country that underpins this law is that what we call the National Gender Policy. There was one in place. There was a 2015 one which expired, was for 5 years, expired in 2020. I know that there's an initiative to get a new one done. There's a draft there as of 2023, but it's yet to be adopted. We need it also to be adopted because it's to give guidance as far as issues to do with gender is concerned at the ministry. There are also other laws, domestic violence law, which has been in place since 2007. Challenges have been found with it. There's an initiative to review it. When it comes to children, I don't know if I can venture from gender to children. Children are also one of the areas which is under the mandate of this ministry. The Children's Act, which has been in place since 1998, also some challenges have been found with it. There is, as I'm speaking, a bill to amend most parts of it to make it more efficient in protecting our children. That bill also hasn't been processed. So there are a number of laws that need to be addressed. Then also on the other angle of the ministry, which is social protection, there's also a social protection bill, which is also has also been prepared and it's yet to be processed. So I'm sure that she should also see. I'm expecting that she should see this also one of the important bills to pursue, so that there'll be some structure in terms of all the various social protection initiatives that we are all are being implemented.
Okay. Now, given this 28% nomination that we've seen for the women so far, what do you envisage for women in politics in the next few years to come?
Okay. So this law also applies to women in politics as well. And the expectation is that we would have more women in politics as we are speaking. Currently, I'm sure that we are all keeping track of what's happening in Parliament in terms of those who have been elected. Out of the 276 member Parliament, from the numbers that we have, with a few areas still not very clear, it's just about 41 that we have, which is a very low number. I don't think that will reach 15%. So we're very, very low. Yes, the law came in when the major parties had already finished their primaries, so it wasn't possible for it to have an impact. And laws are of prospective effect. A law can't have a retrospective effect. So we are hoping that as the law is implemented, we would see more and more women gaining positions within their political parties, as well as being in a position to be elected and nominated into various positions. There is a bit of a challenge. One of the weakest parts of the law is that to do with political party representation. So it encourages the parties to also abide by the indicators, but it doesn't. I mean, in countries that have managed to increase the numbers of women in parliament, etc., it's like a mandatory quota that is pushed, and it is usually found in constitutional provisions. Unfortunately for us, in our constitution, the criteria for who qualifies to go to parliament doesn't include gender inclusion. It includes things about your age, about where you live, about your whatever, not having a criminal past, etc. So there's a need for us to go further, push for constitutional amendments of some articles in the Constitution, I think 93 and 94, to ensure that gender inclusivity becomes one part. That way, once that is done, then the provisions in the Act can then be strengthened to make it mandatory, so that by the next elections, 2028, we'll be in a position to ensure that we have more women. Out of a country, in our population, we have about 50.7, almost 51% of the population being women. How many are in parliament now? The previous parliament had 14.5. This current one, it will just increase very marginally because the numbers are so few. Only about 41 here have made it. We need to be able to make a big difference in that. And then within the political parties themselves, we don't want them to be only in the women's wing. They should also be in positions to be chairpersons and vice chairpersons, etc., in there.
But is it always, the problem of governments when it comes to low leadership of women? Are the women themselves ready to take up these roles? Are they ready to contest on the parliamentary front, for instance? Are they ready to contest, when it comes to these big tables that we expect them to be seated on? Are they ready for that?
I think so. There are lots of challenges. But I think that there are many women who are willing and able. I'm sure if you kept track of the elections that took place, there are places where even women are fighting against other women to be able to gain positions. The problem is, remember I mentioned the sociocultural views about women and leadership, etc., and therefore it takes an extra strong woman to be able to stand for position, to be able to. We have a first past the post system. You have to be able to pass the primaries in your party before you also have to stand the national election. It's very challenging. Politics also requires a lot of money, and women who are stressed with using most of their money to look after their children also have very little money packed to be able to engage in it. Yes, people rely on what is known as godfather system. I haven't heard of a godmother system. And the godfather system sometimes comes with challenges because, the godfather will invest in your election, and then when the time for the call comes, you don't know what the implications would be for people. So it is very challenging, but I believe that there are lots of qualified women who want to stand and who should be given the opportunity to stand. In some countries, I know that even within our own country, most of the parties started their own small form of affirmative action in lowering some of the requirements for standing in various positions, but it still wasn't enough. We need an intentional action to be able to get more women in our parliament.
Okay.
Which will reflect the population.
Okay, absolutely. We have, seen a number of women advocacy groups advocating for women to strive to be better for themselves. But if you say that, women are still faced with a lot of challenges when it comes to, contesting, especially on the political fronts, is it an indication that these groups have not done so much in terms of, making sure the grounds are fertile for women to contest in some of these parliamentary elections that you talk about?
Yes, there are a number of advocacy groups that have been doing work in trying to encourage, train sensitize, equip women to be active in party politics. But most of these NGOs are financially constrained.
Okay.
If you're doing, work at that level, you need funding. And for some years now, it's been very difficult to get funding to sustain the NGO itself. How much more to run programs? If you're going to run a training program for people, you have to house them, you have to give refreshments, you have to give transportation in many instances. So I think that many of them have been challenged. A few have had funding and have done some of the work, but I guess it hasn't been enough. So as an advocate myself, I would advocate that those who can support more programs to try to educate and sensitize and strengthen women right from the school level. We don't wait till they're out and then they're working and they're struggling with life, etc. But to encourage people to enter politics as well as other meaningful places that will contribute towards development at a very young age, and they can be encouraged to come up.
Absolutely. Yes. Now, we earlier talked about the minister designates for the gender ministry. I want us to touch briefly on the minister designates for tourism, culture, and creative arts. That's Ablajifa Gomashi. What do you make of her nomination?
She's also another wonderful woman. Also interacted with her in Parliament, and I think she also did some work within the development space a little bit. I think that she's been a deputy minister. I believe she's been a deputy minister there before. She herself is a creative person. So with the experience she's had as a deputy minister before and her interest in advancing the creative world, I believe that she would also do very well. She's also served as an MP for a while, so she knows about the lawmaking process and what to do to be able to get things done. So I believe that she would also do well.
Okay.
Yes.
What about Emilia Arthur, the minister designates for the fishes and aquaculture?
I also know her a little bit from the development world. Very intelligent, very smart woman who's done, I know she's done a lot of development work.
Okay.
So I believe that with the experience that she has, I also believe that she would also do well. Because she's a knowledgeable what I remember about her is that she's a very knowledgeable person. So I believe that she would be able to deliver.
Okay, but do you think just knowledge is enough?
An experience, I think, because she's also worked for quite a while. She should be, she's got an experience, knowledge as well as experience. I would add experience in some fields. In the development field, I know she's done a lot of work. Yeah.
Okay.
So
now, there's also
well.
Elizabeth Ofosu, the minister designates for trade, agribusiness, and industry.
Okay. I know her as she's a lawyer by profession, and I know she's been the deputy minister, I believe, or substantive minister at tourism, yes. And I think she did well. I recall at a point there was an advisory committee at the University of Ghana School of African Studies, and I was on the board with her, and I was quite impressed with what she had. So I believe that having served as a minister before, she has all that experience. So I believe that she'll be able to put it into effect in this other area, which is also challenging, that she's been given.
Okay. There are a number of regional minister nominees, but I want to skip and go to the Greater Accra Regional Minister Designate. That's Linda Oklu. What's your take on Linda?
I don't really know her.
Okay.
Yes, I don't really know her, so I can't say much. But what I can say is that if His Excellency the President found it good enough to put her in a position, that means that she would have a certain kind of experience, qualification, and experience that would enable her to do the work that is being given to her. And I really wish her well in whatever position she's
But, she is the first female minister we've had in the Greater Accra region in a very long while. What sort of signal does that send?
Well, it sends a signal that women are capable. And there's nothing, I mean, there are very few things that you can say women cannot do. So I believe that, she would, I'm sure she should be willing to learn, to be able to learn more about the terrain. And then it requires a lot of coordination. So I think I saw a little bit about her, a write-up about her background, a little bit. She seems to have some qualification that will enable her to do the work. So it's a very challenging area. It's a capital city. And so I believe if she has the ability to work with other people and work with them well, because I think they have these regional coordinating councils, which has the various, within Accra, we also have sub-metros.
Yes.
Before we have the main the metro itself. So there'll be people. She should, if she has the ability to work with people well, I think that should be.
It'll be
able
a
to
plus
successful.
for her.
It should be a plus for her, and if she's able to succeed, all the better. There are many challenges, sanitation issues, etc., etc. So we are now trying to gather the profile of the various women so that we can learn more about them.
Absolutely.
Earlier, once you mentioned, because I'd had some interaction with them, it was easy for me to
talk about
give
them.
my opinion.
Okay,
yes.
That's okay. Now, SDG 5, I mean, is targeting about 50% female representation by 2030. We are seeing some strides per this nomination and according to the affirmative action bill. Is there hope that really by 2030 Ghana would have achieved the SDG 5?
It's very challenging.
Okay.
I mean, from where we are now, I mean, it's going to be very challenging.
That's 5 years from now.
5 years from now is very challenging. But I think that even if we are close, even if we don't get to the 50% parity, and we are close, we hit 40 in every sector by the 2030, it would be good. And incidentally, in the acts, in this very act that we are pushing, we pushed for and got it done. Originally, the target was to get to 50% by the year 2030, in line with the SDGs. Sorry, but a close look at the final one, which is available at Assembly Place, shows that it's been extended to 34.
Okay.
The year 2034, which we were, really not really clear why that was done. We don't know whether that was an error or that was whatever. But there's an international goal, which is 2030. So we think that this law will help us to get there a little bit, but I'm not really sure whether we'll be able to actually hit the parity by the year 2030 as anticipated. But if we are close to it, we'd have achieved something.
Okay.
And would keep working.
We are wrapping up. So what will be your final words?
So my final word is that for us from the Affirmative Action Bill Coalition, we are monitoring the numbers. And so far, what we've seen about the ministers seems to be good. We hope that the trend will not change. And we hope that by the time it's all over, at least at this early stage, would have reached the 30%. We'd also like to see a similar thing when it comes to other appointments, including the state boards, etc., where we are hoping that some of the CEOs, we want to see more and more women. There are other appointments that will be made, ambassadorial and so many others. So we have a lens. We have our goal is to track and to advocate where we think the numbers are coming down. Right now we are happy with what we are seeing. We are hoping that it will go higher and higher, and we'll see more women, so that this government will be able to achieve the target that have been set in the law.
Okay. I just want your expectations briefly. I mean, the presidents are still nominating people. What will be your expectations in the next batch?
So my expectation in the next batch is that we should have more women. Okay. So far from the regional ministers, the original 10 that were appointed, I think there were 3 women and 7 men. So I'm hoping that in the next set of 6, at least 2 to 3 women should come in. And then that would let us very early get to that target. For other ministries too, I'm hoping that we'll see more and more women. Also, I hear there's a list out. A list out, today.
Yes.
Whatever.
Yes. There were new appointments, 9 appointments made, nominations made today.
Yes. So we're hoping that my expectations is that there are a lot of capable women out there. So I'm hoping that most of them will be given the opportunity for leadership, so that our country will benefit from the knowledge that women also have, so that to be a more inclusive country that we'll have.
Absolutely.
And women will contribute their quota to the development of this country.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been engaging Sheila Menka Premo. She's the convener for the Affirmative Action Law Coalition. She's been talking to me about female representation in President Mahama's nomination so far, which signals 28% so far. And the Affirmative Action Bill seeks to target about 30% of female representation. So that has been my conversation with Sheila Menka Premo, Esquire. Thank you very much for your time.
Star News is coming to you live on Ultimate 106.9 FM in Kumasi, Empire 102.7 FM in Takrady, Zeps 95.9 FM in Zebila, Nissim 100.1 FM in Lamshao, My Star Radio in the USA. Also live on Facebook on Star 103.5 FM.